Hey, what's going on, guys? We've got a special guest here today. We have Greg Muzzillo. He founded Proforma in 1978, and he has more than 500 franchise offices worldwide with over 650 million in sales. He's involved in philanthropy and has a huge family at home. Greg, I wanted to ask you, first of all, so grateful to have you here. And then I want
Thanks
to
for
ask
having
you,
me, Jordan.
absolutely, we're excited to have you on the Clockedin podcast. Now, in 1978, why did you quit that accounting job? I feel most people go through the progression. They go through, get the degrees, and they're like, yes, I'm an accountant now. I have a safe job.
Yeah. So I actually graduated first in my class in accounting.
Oh,
I
wow.
loved studying accounting. However, when you study accounting in college, you go to class for an hour and then you go have lunch with your fraternity brothers and friends, right? And then maybe you go to another class, then you come back and play wall ball or whatever. You know what I mean? It's an hour here and an hour there. And I had the Ernst and Young Award, accounting award. I had won all of the accounting awards, and so I decided I mean, it didn't take me long to realize I love studying it, I hated doing it. And so my professors, when I'd be back on campus and I'd be speaking about entrepreneurship, my professors say, Greg, what happened to you? And I said, you guys need to have a class in accounting that starts at 7 in the morning, that goes to 8 o'clock at night, and it's called Sit Down and Shut Up, because I can't do that. Right? I didn't know. Those first early years in accounting are head down. And I was an auditor on like General Motors and American Electric Power, et cetera. It's horrible. It was, at least for me. I kind of like MBWA management by walking around, and so yeah, I couldn't sit still at a desk for 15 minutes, much less 12 hours.
Yeah. I was actually on the phone with my brother, and he was telling me about his experience because he's a CPA as well, and it's just so challenging. It never ends. But for you, doing so well, how do you think about Proforma? Like, what were the thoughts going on there? Because it's kind of a transition from accounting. Like, it's definitely a little transition.
Well, it was some serendipity, surely. I always do, since I was a young person. I'm probably one of those stories you hear about mowed lawn, shovel snow, you know, relatively independent minded person. And I always wanted to own my own business, really. But it became very clear to me very quickly that I didn't like accounting, but I didn't know what I would do. But I had a roommate after I graduated from college that worked for a small little printing distributorship. And he hated his boss. I hated accounting. And so we'd go out on Friday nights looking for dates for Saturday night. And he'd be talking a little bit about what he did. And the more I listened, I thought, wait a minute. You sell all this printing and promotional product stuff, huge industry, $300 billion in the United States alone, all custom printed. And you don't have to have any manufacturing or distributors. You don't have to have any manufacturing, inventory, employees. It was something that we could start very humbly, which is all we had, right, with virtually nothing. And so it didn't take me long to say to my former partner, I bought him out many, many decades ago now. I said, you know what? You know sales. I know accounting. We can do this. And we agreed within 6 months of graduating from college that we'd each put in $100, buy a phone answering machine, some stationery, and a used file cabinet, and started knocking on doors.
Really? That's fantastic. I mean, just because the way I really enjoy what you do is because you simplify everything to the most, it's just do this. And it's like take the action. And there's so many times where we try to overcomplex everything, and it's not that difficult. So how were those early years?
I recently spoke to a group, and to people that are where I were in those early years, and I said to them, enjoy where you are. I know they're all sitting there, probably either aspiring to start their own business or maybe sales up to $500,000 a year. kind of organization, Young Entrepreneurs of America, I think it was. And I said, enjoy where you are, because I didn't enjoy where I was then. I was in such a hurry to grow a bigger business, and a lot of other things that happened, because I knew I wasn't going to be able to eat Campbell's soup or peanut butter and jelly sandwiches forever. So I was in such a hurry to get to tomorrow, to get to the next level of success. I know I didn't slow down and just enjoy the fact that I owned my own business. I didn't work for the CPA firm anymore. I was figuring out how to get going and growing. And so on one hand, how were those early years? On one hand, it was very hard. It was filled with rejection. We call on businesses. So the method back then was to do something called field calling. That's kind of dead now after COVID, but field calling is where you just pull into maybe a large high rise, or you go into a business park where there's lots of businesses, and you go door to door, and you'd ask the receptionist, you'd give the person your business card,
Yes.
you'd ask who buys your printing and promotional products. Maybe that person would see you. Maybe you would just get a name for somebody to call later for an appointment, right? And well, the truth is 9 out of 10 people are happy with who they're buying that stuff from. So there's a lot of rejection. I had
Yes.
one person, when I made a field call, sometimes those offices have that little sliding glass door. There's this little sliding window, actually, a little sliding window they had. And
Yeah.
this lady, I don't take no easily for an answer now, but I said, well, she said, well, so-and-so wouldn't be interested. But I said, well, then who's the director of marketing, or anyhow, she got so frustrated with me. She said, I told you we're not interested. And she slammed that little glass window, and that little glass window broke. And I thought, that's rejection. Anyhow, so there was a lot of rejection in those early days. However, there was a lot to celebrate and enjoy. I was on my own. I was growing my wings and developing something that would become what it is today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important because I actually have a group that I coach, and they're all 20 something, 30 something. And a lot of the times we're always in that quest for the next. And it's like, how do you slow down? And like one of the ways I really found that was gratitude. I felt like when you're grateful for a situation, even if it's not the situation you like, but you have food, shelter, clothing, you're like, yes, I am grateful for where I'm at right now. You just show up better.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm big into the law of attraction, and I believe with all my heart that gratitude's the attitude that gets us more of what we want.
Yeah,
Gratitude's the attitude.
absolutely. It's really one of the distinguishing things. So when you're in early years and you're transitioning to going from a little company to a little bit bigger company and then eventually a big company, what was the difference there? Because I know you have these 4 financial growth principles about getting new customers, selling the current customers more, hiring and managing salespeople, learn how to buy out the competition. How was that process for you? And then where did those 4 principles kind of come into play? Because honestly, when I heard them the first time, I sat down and I was like, I just started calling people. I go, Jordan, get more customers. Like, keep it
Well,
simple. Keep it
yeah,
simple.
yeah. I don't know. I have to be candid. Sometimes I think everybody sees the world the way I see the world, but my wife keeps reminding me, Greg, you see the world very differently than many people see the world. But I try to reduce things down to their sort of simplest and try to major in the majors. I think
Yes.
a lot of people do so many things that are going to make them crazy that they're never going to make themselves wealthy. We might get to that, we might not, but it occurred to me that there were only 4 things that I could do that were majoring in the majors. And they were, number 1, sell more to my current customers. Number 2, go get new customers. Number 3, hire and manage salespeople. And number 4, buy out the competition. And short of robbing a bank, there was nothing else I could do to create wealth. And so I chose early on to focus on those 4 things and try to delegate everything else.
Okay. Yeah, because it's very difficult in the beginning when, like you said, there's only 2 people and you're like, who's going to do the invoicing? I'm the accounting guy. And then you got to transition to the sales role. And it's like, do we trust the accounting guy? Do we trust, like, so how do you develop those people and really figure out those places and know when it's really time to make that leap? Because I feel like that's one of the most difficult portions.
Yeah. So in the early days, which are different than today. Today, there's a
Of
lot of
course.
structure. I don't run the business anymore. My wife does. She's brilliant. She was one of the first women to go to the University of Notre Dame. And yet she came out of investment banking and commercial banking. She ran $500 million portfolios.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And larger.
Wow.
Anyhow, but back in the early days, my attitude was, listen, first of all, people would say, hey, what are the benefits here? And I'd say, listen, if you benefit Proforma, then we'll figure out how to benefit you. And I'd say, listen, success here and opportunity is here, just like a bowl of cherries. I'm looking for people that want to put their hands in the bowl and grab some opportunities and run with them. That's kind of what I told just about everybody.
Yeah.
And some people got it and got after it, and some people didn't. And the key is to either reposition or invite people to exit that don't get it and know how to get after it. And fortunately, we found a lot of people that believed in the dream, saw the vision, and we were having fun. We were young, we were growing, and it's a lot of fun being on an elevator when it's going up. Sadly, I know of many companies that the elevator's going down, and that's not as much fun. But we were having fun, and we were all in and around the same age group. I was in my later 20s when we started franchising, in my mid 30s when we were getting going, and so we're all within 10 years of each other. It's different today, right? I mean, we have people that I'm 40 years different from.
Yes.
So it's a significantly different environment.
Company. Yeah. I speak with a lot of podcast guests and just people in my network where it's really difficult to go from that startup because that's a completely different skill set to the business size that you're at now, completely different skill set to running those and just being the business owner and all those intangibles because it's just different. It's just different. And so you mentioned about your wife. How did you guys see that opportunity? Was it business first? Was it marriage? Like how did that kind of work out where she became the CEO? And also my other question is for you, was that like an ego thing? Because I know like was it hard to give up like control? Because I know so many times people are founders and they just can't give up the control, but it's better for them in the long run.
Yeah, well, we got married 22 years ago, 23 years ago, something like that. And I said to her, why don't you come in and check out the company? She was still in her banking career. And in fact, she was in some kind of training program where they were getting her ready for the C-suite at Comerica Bank. I mean,
Oh, wow.
a substantial bank. Well, when the leaders at Proforma had an opportunity to meet her, get to know her, they said, Greg, we got to get her to come work here. She really is brilliant, and it comes across very quickly when you meet her. And she really didn't want to do that. In fact, she said, Greg, I'm happy to come in and meet the people as long as I never have to work there. Well, anyhow, somehow we talked her into coming and working there. And it was hard. I think if you talk to anybody that works with their spouse, it's hard to figure out whose lane is whose. And for me to slowly give up, because everything was in my lane, and then
Yes.
to give up the pieces parts. It was easy to give up the pieces parts I wasn't good at. It was a lot harder to give up the pieces parts I thought I was good at, but I really wasn't necessarily that good at them. So it was a process.
Yeah, I could imagine. And so how long has she been the CEO there, and how has that relationship, because it's so hard to not bring the business home. Like, obvious, is it everything the business, or it's it can be a challenging.
Well, we love
Yeah,
what we do.
of course.
And or we wouldn't be doing it because we don't need to do it anymore.
Yeah.
And we have 4 of our 10 children are in the business, and 3 of their
Oh,
spouses are in
wow.
the business. So we talk about business a lot. We also talk about a lot of other things. We have 11 grandchildren, going on 12 grandchildren. So we have many other things in our lives that keep us busy. But yeah, there's no doubt that the talk at the dinner table is about business, and I'm glad for that. Even when the children were younger, most of them are older now. Our youngest is a freshman in college, but I think it's good for children to hear business talk. I think at the dinner table. Yes, it's important to hear how are you doing in school, how you doing in sports. It's important, but it's important for them to hear business talk because whether eventually they're all going to work for something that feels like a business, even if it's a not-for-profit or a church, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, there's a lot of things that are business about every place you work.
Absolutely. And I think it gives such an advantage to the children, because if they're getting exposed to that type of mindset, because it's not just the conversations, it's how you think through problems, it's all of it. And if they're getting exposure to that, it's like, whoa. And then you get your 10-year-old or 12-year-old to give you advice, and you're like, new perspective, never thought about it that way. I might bring that to the meeting. It becomes really interesting. I see you smiling there.
Well, I'm not sure we got as much advice as we got asked good questions.
Yes.
I hear what you're saying. Sometimes they would ask really good questions that were like, good question.
Gets you thinking about it a little differently. So, and then also, so you guys started to grow and get into franchising. What was the wake up moment there where you're like, we could franchise this? There might be a potential here. Because I feel like as business owners, sometimes we want to just bring everything in house, and it's not always the thought of let's build out other people's business. Like, it's just an interesting model.
Right. So it was actually failure. We had a failure in our business. So in 1978, we started the company. By 1985, we were doing $5 million, $6 million in 1985 dollars. We were ranked by Inc. magazine, INC magazine, for small businesses on the Inc. 500 list of fastest growing companies. That's when there are only 500. Inc. magazine now
Yes.
is the 5,000 fastest growing business. So we were on the Inc. 500 list 3 years in a row, and it was time to expand from Cleveland, Ohio. I started the business in Cleveland, Ohio, where I had grown up, and so I thought, well, it's time for us to try to expand. And I wanted to open up a sales office in Columbus. It's about 2 hours from Cleveland. So went through a process of putting ads in newspaper. There was no internet back then, and found some people, drove down to Columbus, interviewed some people, came back and thought about it, went back down and interviewed a final few candidates, came back to Cleveland, then finally decided on the person we were going to invite to be the first sales manager of our first sales office, remote sales office. So we made an appointment. We went down to give him his job offer, get him hired, and talk about onboarding and growing, and got there and talked with him, and he didn't seem right. And he said, I just got to tell you, I can't do this. Right? 2-hour drive. You could have called me and told me that I can't do this. The more I think about this, I want to own my own business like you do. That's what he said.
Oh,
Ouch, right? That really hurts. I mean, probably had 2 months worth of work in
yeah.
placing ads, interviewing people, driving there now for the 3rd time. That seemed like failure.
Yeah.
But I thought about it, and I thought, well, what could have gone differently there? Because I think a lot um, about things.
Yeah.
I thought, it's interesting. Here's some young fellow that really wants to own his own business, just like we did at the time, just like I did at the time. And I thought to myself, maybe there's a lot of people that would rather own their own business than open up sales offices for us. So then I thought, how could we have used our infrastructure? Not that much, but nonetheless, some $5 million businesses of infrastructure to have empowered him to own his own business rather than be a sales manager for us. And I thought a lot. I talked to a lot of people, probably for about a year, just thinking it through, talking it through, not wanting to hurry up and put another ad in a newspaper. And came up with the idea of franchising the business as an opportunity to really give other people the opportunity to own a business like I wanted to own, and yet leverage off of our infrastructure and our experience to do that more successfully than they could on their own.
Yeah. Honestly, when you tell the story and you know the answer, it makes total sense. But there are so many times in our life where we might not get the job we want. We face rejection constantly. And it's that thinking that we need to do for the audience. You got to think through those issues that come up, because the thing is, if you don't think about those failures, then they stay as failures. They don't become learnings and they don't become opportunities
Right,
which come down the line.
right,
So I
right.
think the way you explain that and like really seeing that, it makes a lot of sense. And so how did the franchising start out? Because I again, you're getting the first couple people in. Like how does that journey go? And then you want to get winners early. How does that look?
Yeah. So can we take a 10-second break? I got to go potty. I'm not going to last a half an
Yeah.
hour. I'll be back in five. So 1985, 1986, we decided to start franchising. And there's no internet. It's a very different world back then. I joined a group called the International Franchise Association. I'm a big believer in immersion. If I decide to do something, I want to immerse myself in learning as much as I possibly can about it. I learned a lot from that trade association. I learned a lot from networking, going to their initial meetings, etc. But we would go to these own your own business shows. Most every town, larger town, has one of these own your own business shows, probably a couple times a year, maybe a couple of different promoters. And we would just put up a booth, no clue what we were doing. We had designed a beautiful brochure that explained the story. I know we went to the first Own Your Own Business show, and we just handed out, I don't know how many hundreds of these $10 brochures, and I was getting sick to my stomach, handing out like $10 bills to everybody, and nothing happened. We didn't get any deals, but fortunately, I at the second business show, I happened to go across the hallway when there was a little lull in the show, and I asked the fellow in the booth across, I said, how are you doing at these shows? Because we just did terrible. And I happened to recognize him from the town that we were in prior. He says, oh, we sell to 3 to 5 deals per show. I said, how do you do that? Can I buy you dinner after? And he said, sure, let's go. And he charged us an embarrassingly small amount of money to consult with us. And he taught us everything we needed to do at those shows to find prospects, tell our story, sell the story. And he even came to Cleveland a couple of times and helped us put together a training program. So just being humble enough to say to somebody across the aisle, how are you doing at this? Because we're doing terrible.
Yeah, I think that's so valuable, because there's so many times in our life where we're all going through that moment where we're handing out the brochures. It's our first time. We don't know if it works. And then obviously it doesn't, because you haven't done enough reps. You don't know what to say. Like you just, it's expected failure. Like, and then you could go back and be like, I suck. This is terrible. Have that negative mindset. Or it's like, someone is doing well in this. How are they doing well? Can I speak with them? And it's just so valuable to find resources and ask for help, because most people are willing to help you. And if you pay them, then they're incentivized to help you. And most of the rates aren't nearly as high as you would think for what they're providing.
And it was obvious. What he said was really obvious. He says, well, Greg, you're a printing and promotional products distributorship franchise. So we had all this samples on a table with a sign behind us. And if you go by a yogurt stand franchise, you just see a picture of yogurt and you know what they do. If you go by a submarine sandwich shop, you see a picture of a submarine sandwich and you know what they do. Then you come to our booth and it's like you see all this stuff on the table and it's like people say, what do you guys even do? Right? It wasn't clear. It wasn't obvious. And so he said, you know what you need to do, Greg? You need to go talk to the promoter and get get a booth that's at the end, where at the end of the convention hall, because usually it's not the end of the convention hall, but there's a curtain there and there's just no more booths. And then you need to ask if you could set up like 10 chairs behind your booth and tell people, come on in. If people would say, well, what do you do? Just say, come on in and listen. And we do little mini 5-10 minute seminars behind the booth. And, you know, at some point, most people that are walking around those shows get tired enough that they'll sit down, even if they don't want to learn what you have. So he showed us how to, it doesn't sound complicated when I tell you that, does it? But if we hadn't figured that out, if he hadn't showed us how to figure that out, we might not have any franchise owners today. How to better tell and sell our story.
And the crazy thing is that most people would sit there and go, that's like, how did you not figure that out? It's easy. And it's only easy once you know and you get it right. It's not before that, it is a blind path and you are just guessing and trying again. So most of the business advice becomes very simple, but it's like when you're really applying, you're like, whoa, slow down. Let's make this really make sense. Because it's sometimes you need to get another perspective, because you're right. It is a little thing, but it's everything is the little thing. And 2 minutes at a time, we're just like, no, it's fine. Just keep going. It's fine. You'll figure it out. Spend the money. And the other thing I want to commend you on is being the front lines on the new idea, like going out there and learning about these things, because otherwise you don't know. Like it can become so challenging and difficult. So it takes that mindset. So where'd you develop your mindset of really just continuous growth, continuous learning? Because I feel like that's some of the biggest challenges we have. It's not that people are like actually broke. Like, yes, there's some people who are struggling, but like it's a lot of like inside our brain that we're not allowing ourselves to see these opportunities and see this success. So what's really allowed you to have, I mean, 46 years, like it's impressive stuff. What's really allowed that to happen mindset wise?
Well, I'd say I am creatively curious, right? Like there's got to be a better way. I'd say I'm always relentlessly in the pursuit of a better way. I believe in immersion, like joining that International Franchise Association, attending the meetings, doing the networking. Um, Because if you take a look at the market and you say to yourself, now, wait a minute, businesses spent $300 billion on what we sell. And at the time, we didn't have meaningful, measurable market share. In all candor, at 650 million, we don't really have meaningful, measurable market share of the industry even today.
Yeah.
So it just made sense that there had to be a better way. But sometimes that better way is taking a left-hand turn or a right-hand turn. And I don't know where all the turns are, but if you find somebody that can be your, your navigational pilot and take in what they have to say, sometimes light bulbs will go off.
Yes. So it's finding people who have been there before and they can kind of show you along the way. So you're not finding out every mistake for yourself, but you're having people
100%.
help you along. Yeah, because there's a lot of the time there's a lot of ego or ignorance or not willing to learn from others. And it's like, do the complete opposite of that. Like, learn from everybody.
Yeah. And I think, and I said this to the group the other day, and I say it a lot, be an ask, A-S-K, be an ask whole. Like, ask and ask some more. And if you don't understand, ask again. And so there was a guy in town, Cleveland, Ohio, that owned the largest franchisor at the time in Cleveland. And so I called him up. What can I lose? The worst thing that's going to happen is he says no. And then I'm right back to where I was before I had an opportunity to meet him. And he said, come on in, Greg. It was very nice. I think a lot of times you can be mentored by somebody in one meeting. You don't have to go on for months or years, sometimes just one meeting. So I met with a guy, great guy, had about an hour's worth of a meeting. And at the end, he said, hey, do you have any other questions for me? And I said, no. I said, but I really appreciate your time. I said, do you have any other advice for me? He said, yeah, one more thing. He said, one more word of advice. Don't sell dirt. I thought, what does that mean? Don't sell dirt. We sell printing and promotional products. He says, well, no, don't sell territories. Now I'm 28 years old. I think at that time I had 3 kids. I'm in Cleveland, Ohio. I think I would have sold the rights to San Francisco for a cup of coffee. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And in my mind, we were going to do territories. But he explained to me that they had a territorial business model. They had many of their franchise owners that owned territories that had maxed out in their income.
Region. Yeah.
And had no, they had not optimized their life. They didn't optimize their territories. And so, but those territories sat there with lots of opportunity, and it really limited the value of his business. So fortunately, he gave me that advice. Don't sell dirt. I went back and I completely changed the business model before we were going to run it out. Had I not, we wouldn't be about 1/10 the size of who we are today, because we have more of an account model, not a territorial model. Because in my business, somebody might be selling today to the CMO of a nice sized company. The CMO leaves their company in Cleveland, Ohio, and goes to work for somebody in some company in San Francisco, and they want to take their supplier and their relationship with them. So, I mean, that's just a small example of just being an ask hole, because you can just never ask enough questions.
Yeah. My big takeaway from that was you at the end of the meeting going, hey, is there any other advice you give me? I have no more question. Because obvious, like sometimes it's just in our head, and the amount of times that we think we have to know it all. But the best thing is actually the curiosity. And that's what led me to this podcast, because I wanted to build a system where I could ask people about their stories and it not be, hey, let's do another intro call, because most people don't want to do that. So you make it a win-win scenario for all parties.
Well, the real key to success, and this, is understanding that you don't know it all. And in the beginning, I remember thinking, I need to know it all. I need to go in the sales call and I need to spew off all of the advantages of Proforma. What advantages? We got an answering machine and we're operating out of our apartment, right? So I would tell people, we're a small emerging company, and we have very little overhead, and we pass the savings along to you. Yaka, yaka, yaka. Nobody cares. People care about what they care about, but if you don't ask good questions, you're never going to find out what the sales opportunity really is. And so it took me a while to sort of understand that sales isn't something that happens with the mouth, but rather with the ears. But it's a wonderful journey, just learning every day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So one of the big reasons, and one of the things that we overline about, is Tampa, Florida. So what caused you guys to light up from, like, kind of move one of your headquarters from Cleveland to Tampa, or build out the second one? What caused that? What'd you see in Tampa, and when did that occur?
That would be called sunny, warm weather. I Clearly, you haven't spent much time in Cleveland, Ohio. And for a stint, I lived in Detroit, which is about the same as Cleveland, Ohio. That's a long story. We don't need to get into it, but that's where my wife was from when I married her. And I can do cold, I can do snow, I can't do gray skies. And because of the lakes up there, the Great Lakes, and they are great in the summer,
It's the
but
lake
they
effect.
create, you could go for a week, 10 days without seeing the sun.
It's not
And
healthy.
that's not, it wasn't good and it wasn't healthy for me. And anyhow, my wife was born and spent some time in Jacksonville, and we actually had some land in Jacksonville, and we were going to build in Ponte Vedra. And finally, it got to be the time. And I said to her, I'm not even awake for a sunrise. I need a sunset. And so she basically said, well, go find a sunset. And I went looking up and down the coast of Florida, and I found Tampa, and we love it here.
Yeah, it's incredible. The
Yeah.
city is just it's going like Proforma's going, just up.
Yeah. We need them
I,
to shut the door. Now that we're here, we need them to shut the door.
no one else is allowed. No one else
Yeah.
in Tampa.
Yeah.
Um, no, because it's such a vibrant space, but it's becoming more and more difficult just with pricing and all of those factors. So the other thing you did was you wrote a book, The $1 Million Mindset. What caused you to even take the time to write a book?
Well, it's
Because
not a
I
book yet.
know.
It's not a
Oh,
book
okay.
yet. It's I write a blog for
Okay.
uh industry magazine called $1 Million
Okay.
Mindset. And
Okay.
I'll bet you I've written 400 blogs about having $1 million mindset, a mindset for success. And I want to turn it into a book. I need to turn it into a book. In fact, I called a friend of mine, Jack Canfield. He's the guy that wrote Chicken
Yeah.
Soup for the Soul. I said, Jack,
Yeah.
will you co-author this with me? Because everybody knows Jack. Well, he said, well, Greg, I'm too busy and I can't do it. But he told me how to do it. And it's one of those things on my to-do list that, you got some of those things on your to-do list that you get to next month and you carry it forward. But
It,
I do want to write that book. And really, it's as simple as kind of organizing the thoughts of those 400 or so blogs into chapters.
yeah, absolutely. It sounds very similar to when I had the founder of Reebok on. He's actually in his 80s now. And what happened with him, because I was like, why'd you write this book? And he goes, well, it took me 7 years and I was trying to do the origin. And he's like, basically, dude, I just had some time. And I was just like, I wanted people to know the story of like what actually happened with his business. But I think books are way more meaningful when they're actually thought out. And like you're saying with the blog, and it's not just, hey, grab a ghostwriter and write this up for me. Like it becomes more meaningful that way because it's much more challenging. Everyone's trying to put out a book in 10 minutes, and it's like, that's not the way to do it.
I agree.
Yeah, I think that's much more valuable. So for you, 10 children, how do you even, I feel like scheduling, I feel it sounds like you're a little bit past that now with the one kid in college or the last one in college. But it's like with that and the grandchildren, how do you think about scale? How do you think about size? Because it seems like everywhere in your life, like Proforma, massive, 500 plus, like franchisee, like it's just so many 10-person fan. Like these are just big numbers that most people are like, I only take care of myself. So how do you think about that differently? Because you have, yeah.
They're spread out. So the oldest is 42, maybe
Okay.
43. Don't tell her, I don't remember. And our youngest is 19. So
Okay.
they were spread out. And fortunately, they were able, some of the older ones were sort of able to help with some of the younger ones with
Yes.
driving them to school or helping watch them if we were going to somebody else's sporting events. But one wise person once said to me, Greg, people are going to ask you, you've got, I think it's when I had 5 kids, how do you do it? And this person said, I have the perfect answer. He says, well, how many, he said, ask people, how many kids do they have? And they'll say 2 or 3 or whatever their answer is. And he says, so if somebody says, if you say, well, how many kids do you have? And they'll say like 2 or 3. And then you say to them, well, I'll bet they take up all of your time, right? And inevitably people say, well, that's right. And I said, well, I've got however many kids, fill in the blank, and they take up all of my time. So it's all I got. So
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense because it's just the thing I've seen is when people grow, it's really a benefit of the community and building better people. So I think it's super beneficial. And then the final thing for you, and then we'll kind of close this out, is how did you get to the business owner mindset? Because I feel like that when I say business owner, I mean you talk about it a little bit where it's you're in the business or you're working on the business. So how'd you get that transition? Because I feel like so many people struggle with that and can't fully remove themselves in a not remove themselves, but like empower others to run the company. How do you think about that?
it doesn't take long to realize that there are only two activities in business: activities that'll make you crazy and activities that'll make you rich. And in fact, I developed a success system to try to teach this to our. I actually won an award in the printing industry. I don't know if you can see that or not. I actually won
Oh yeah.
I won a Ben
Oh,
Franklin
that's
award,
awesome.
in the printing industry for developing that system.
Oh
And
wow.
it's everybody has a to-do list and everybody has a calendar, right? And everybody has appointments on the calendar and to-do list on their to-do list. But I teach people when I teach, because I teach in our industry a lot, I say, there's a lot of doo-doo on your to-do list, and you need to get rid of the doo-doo. And the doo-doo is the stuff you should never do. You should delegate it. And so in the success system, on the to-do list and on the calendar, people are forced to evaluate, is this an A activity? It will make me wealthy. Or is this a B activity? This will make me crazy. And to evaluate every day, because without evaluation, we wake up and repeat. But if we, before we go to bed, we evaluate, we look at our day or we look at our week and we evaluate how did things go? Then we're a continuously learning machine. And so if people just look at their calendar and say, good night, I spent the whole day working on activities that are going to make me crazy. My to-do list is full of stuff that's going to make me crazy, not make me wealthy. Identify what those things are, find a way to get them off of your desk and onto somebody else's desk to focus on the wealth building activities. And it's really that simple. It isn't any more complicated than that, than just identifying what's going to make you crazy, get rid of it, and then find the stuff that's going to make you wealthy. It's a mindset. That's probably the best way to put it. It's a mindset, but it's also a tool and a resource so that people can continuously measure every day. In the success system that I built, people could add up how many hours did I spend on A activities and how many
Yeah.
hours did I spend on B activities.
I think that's so powerful because there's so many of us that will spend so much time watching TV on our phones, on the social media, and in reality, we're not moving the needle. And people are like, I had such a busy day. And it's like, you just went through three different apps and didn't call anyone and said you had a busy day. Like, that's not a busy day. A
Yes,
busy day. Yeah.
you can go home exhausted and you can tell your spouse, I'm so exhausted, I had a busy day. But you could have had a busy day and not have done one thing to create wealth for yourself, your family, or your legacy. And that's a shame, because
Yeah.
when your spouse is at home or maybe working another job or and counting on you to be spending your time to advance the family and to be able to put the children in the best of schools and have the best of homes and the best of opportunities, you're not just letting yourself down wasting your time. You're wasting, you're letting your family and your legacy down. There are a lot of people, in this world, I know, because I probably talked to at least 10,000 distributors in our industry in the recruiting process. That's about all I do today, is just on the recruiting side. And there's a lot of people that just make bad decisions, and as a result will never live the life they could have and will never leave the legacy for their family or for the world they could have if they just made different decisions each day.
Wow. That's profound. That's profound. So, Greg, where can people find you? Where can they learn more about you? And yeah.
Well, you can find there's www.proforma.com. There's www.proformafranchise.com. And you could go to LinkedIn and find my profile too. There's not a whole lot of Greg Muzzillos in the world. So
Absolutely. I'll put that all in the show notes. And I want to really thank you. I think that was awesome. Thank you for the time.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for letting me share a little bit of my stories, and good luck to you on your continued success and growth.
Thank you.